Number 2 is going to be dealing with the core-periphery model, and you can go back and look those up later. Some of these answers, I'm just going to be a little brief. Letter A, describe the model. I'm going to be brief. Go back to your notes, find the right answers. But remember, the core-periphery model is developed by people who support Marxism. The reason being is it deals with the core countries, your capitalist countries, and then your periphery countries, and then those in between labeled semi-periphery countries. Remember, the core countries are the ones that dominated the other countries, and so what we run into is capitalism dominating the rest of the world and taking advantage of the rest of the world and putting people groups as lesser than themselves. Again, go back in your notes, add more detail. That was just a brief summary. B, discuss how the European Union excluded non-member countries from core benefits. So this is focusing the core-periphery model on Europe back during the development of the European Union. Europeans withheld advances in shipping, communications, and technology from non-member countries so that they can retain domination of those societies. You had a lot of the Western European nations that were in control of the European Union, and some of these Eastern European nations wanted to be part of the European Union, but the Western European nations would not allow that to happen. They allowed them to be members, but then there were certain restrictions on that so that those countries that wanted to gain membership or those that were non-members, so that the member nations of the European Union could control them in certain ways, which is a direct reflection of the core-periphery model. C, describe how cell phones and the internet has begun evening out the playing field for developing countries, and support your opinion with examples. Now, one thing that you got to understand with this is that cell phones and the internet there's a lot of those in more developed nations, but you also have those in other nations, a lot of newly industrialized countries, and even in some less developed countries, but not as a majority. Countries like Spain, Greece, and Mexico are experiencing rapid growth in industries that languished before global communication because they could compete globally and not just locally. And this has kind of evened out the playing field with countries who maybe do not have an overall abundance of infrastructure. And so cell phones and internet has allowed businesses to develop in some of these other countries and allowed people to reach out to these other countries that may not have that infrastructure and still purchase from those countries because these people have cell phones and the internet, and it's allowed them to search for businesses in these countries as well. All right. D, describe how the exploitation of semi-peripheral countries by core countries affect the peripheral countries. Semi-peripheral countries got to be the aggressors and pass on the exploitation practiced on them by the core countries. They withholded from peripheral countries even their limited access to the core. This perpetuated a system of degradation and exploitation that continues to this day in much of the world because of colonization efforts, in addition to the core being so dominant. Again, another direct reflection of the core-peripheral model. Again, you could go back and add the real-world examples. I'm kind of giving you a brief rundown of what I'm going to be looking for in this question.